Were the recent Nigerian presidential elections free and fair? Will President Goodluck Jonathan be the first incumbent to suffer election defeat? Why were these polls the most closely contested since 1999? Is the losing party likely to accept defeat? What time is it? It's question time. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Muhammadu. First postponed for over a month due to the Boko Haram violence fears, this year's Nigerian elections are said to be the most closely contested since military rule ended in 1999. Meanwhile, preliminary results indicate that former military ruler Muhammadu Buhari took a significant lead over President Goodluck Jonathan based on results from 18 out of Nigeria's 36 states. Apart from Boko Haram killing several people in Yobe and Gombe states, the elections are said to have been relatively peaceful. But will the eventual loser accept defeat? My guest today, Professor Kealeboga Maphunye. He is from the Whippled Brigadier Bam Chair in Electoral Democracy at the University of South Africa. And joining us also is Mr. Malik. I must get this pronunciation right. Dechambenoit. Right. Thank you very much. You are a consultant at Gumbi Dechambenoit and Associates, I guess. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Prof.
Thank you.
These elections, where are they going to be won and where are they going to be lost? I know that this is a question which is normally asked football players, you know. Where is the game going to be lost? In the middle or in the front?
It's a very, very tight call. A very, very tight call in a sense that the usual story that we know about Nigeria, where we are often talking about the North-South divide,
yes,
you know, the religious divide, whereby you've got the Muslim North and the Christian South, does not seem to be, you know, traditionally playing about, because the two gentlemen, Buhari as well as you know, the incumbent President Goodluck Jonathan, seem to be, you know, at neck and neck. It's going to be a very tight call.
Yes.
There are issues, obviously. There are election issues and there are traditional issues that are obviously attributable to the Nigerian elections over the years. But most importantly, since 1999, when we are talking about the democratization era.
Yes. Now, if indeed Goodluck Jonathan loses, is there anything that we should be worried about, except that, well, it's a history in that the incumbent is losing, you know?
Well, I don't think so. You know, I mean, you know, people had this doomsday scenario around the elections. They thought all hell was going to break loose and there was going to be widespread violence all over the place. But that didn't really happen. I think by and large the election went well. What we have seen in the past couple of days is a number of allegations of widespread rigging in certain areas, particularly in the southeast, where President Goodluck comes from.
Yes.
Today, during the announcement, you know, the announcement is continuous, but during the announcement of some results this afternoon, there was an attempt from the PDP, people from President Goodluck's party, to disrupt the announcement. That was handled fairly well by the president of the Electoral Commission, who, you know, told them that that kind of behavior was not appropriate. There have been rumors around the president trying to put in place a curfew to stop the counting of the ballots, but I think all of this just means that at this particular moment in time, the incumbent is just testing the waters to see, you know, how far can I go? But I think what has happened is proving that there's not much room for him to not concede in case there's a defeat.
But the fact of the matter is, counting is going to happen and it will come to an end, and life would have to continue. Whether under President Jonathan or not, the truth of the matter is there's going to be life in Nigeria. What should we be looking out for now?
Well, first of all, this is the most extraordinary election in Nigeria. You know, the the number of registered voters is extremely high. It's upwards of
68
million people. So it shows an interest in the elections. And this interest is due to the fact that there are a number of issues that people hold to heart. There's the issue of corruption. There has been widespread allegations of corruption under the Goodluck administration. $20 billion have been said to be missing from the oil account. There's obviously the kind of issues that we live here, also issues of service delivery. There are also issues around making Nigeria the dynamic economy that it is. Nigerians are very entrepreneurial people, and they want the states to be less involved in their lives so that they can create and generate revenue for themselves. And then I think the most important thing is this issue of Boko Haram. This, by all accounts, is something that hasn't been tackled for the past 5-6 years. It started, the Nigerian government only accepted to have the neighbors involved in the past couple of weeks. So it's largely seen as an electoral ploy on the part of the president. And I think that's where people will be expecting some decisive action on Boko Haram, on corruption, and on further liberalizing the economy.
Prof, do you think that Boko Haram could have cost President Jonathan the vote?
To a certain extent, I believe that is a possibility. However, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of issues involved, some of which have already been outlined. The issue of, obviously, the economy. There's also poverty, Nigeria has got this anomaly whereby it's one of, the richest countries in terms of the oil revenue and all that, and being the foremost economy, in South Africa. In Africa. Recently, it just overtook South Africa, as the foremost economy. However, that being the case, this Boko Haram issue obviously is affecting the northernmost states, but it becomes an issue that is quite embarrassing to the country, embarrassing to the government, and to that extent, it can have an effect of causing the incumbent government, an election. And this, as you mentioned in your intro, this could be a situation whereby the first sitting head of state, the incumbent loses, of course, in an election. But there are other issues, of course. Some of the supporters of the APC, that's the opposition of Muhammadu Buhari, have been saying that this is one of the fairest elections they've ever experienced. Why? Because of the use of the technology. Earlier they were talking about these PVCs and the TVCs. The PVCs are the permanent voters cards, which has been introduced, and the TVCs are the temporary voters cards. And of course, we also have the biometrics included there, whereby you can use fingerprint technology and also have card readers. And they are saying that, for the first time, at least we are able to see a significant reduction in fraudulent or electoral malpractices. And to that extent, that can be another issue to consider.
I want us to take a quick break. When we return, let's talk about business in Nigeria, the oil account. This is question time. Please don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. My guest today, Professor Kealeboga Maphunye, is from Unisa. He is the Whippled Brigadier Bum Chair in Electoral Democracy there at the University of South Africa. Malik Dechambenoit from Gumbi Dechambenoit and Associates joining me here in studio. Now, let's look at the business prospects of the country. 400 million, or rather 400,000 tons of oil get stolen every day in Nigeria, and the country is still able to live. Something is not right somewhere. Either some people in government know where this 400,000 barrels of oil are going, or they do not know deliberately, or there has to be some explanation there.
Well, you know, the theft of oil is a fact of life in Nigeria. You know, this has been happening for the past 40 years or so. But the economy has managed to thrive despite that. I think, you know, the Nigerian economy has changed fundamentally in the past 15, 20 years. The rebase exercise, for example, that led to Nigeria becoming the largest economy in Africa, was largely to include into the metrics all the new sectors that weren't included before, telecoms, banking, consumer goods, etc. And I think today, growth in Nigeria is largely driven by those sectors and by the private sector. However, the public sector continues to depend on the oil revenues. That's really where it is. And I think from it really, you know, where this goes really depends on who's in power after this election. I think if President Goodluck wins, he's going to come under enormous pressure to clean house. The oil minister is already going to OPEC as the next Secretary General, so you may see some changes there. How are those changes going to affect corruption down the line? Because, you know, corruption is endemic at all levels. One of the ways that you find corruption in Nigeria is not just theft of oil, or it's, you know, in the award of contracts, in the distribution of licenses and all of that. So there needs to be more transparency there. If Buhari wins, based on his past record as military head of state, you can expect that there'll probably be much more scrutiny over that sector. I think the first thing he'll probably do is scrutinize everything that had been done before taking measures to kind of render the sector more transparent going forward. So I think you will see changes there, because this has been a big electoral issue. I mean, you know, the issue of the $20 billion that went missing was flagged by the former governor of the central bank. And that really is something that Nigerians felt very strongly about, because I don't think they have seen degrees of corruption, at least with this level of numbers, have never been seen in Nigeria before.
Is oil a curse for the people of Nigeria? Ogoni, for instance.
Look, there are some political scientists who argue that in Africa we experience the politics of the belly. And that once a country has got oil, it definitely becomes a curse. The DRC, we know the situation, you know the situation in South Sudan and so on. In Nigeria, it looks like it's not just a curse, but it's also becoming an issue that is part of the political football. Because where I look at this issue from a different angle, whereby the oil, even if Buhari wins, my worry is, what role will the military be playing in the siphoning of the oil from the wells? Because in the 1980s, when he was in power, still we were experiencing this kind of thing. But
does he still have control over the military? Does he have influence?
He might not necessarily have influence, but remember, there's the nostalgic issue. There's also the issue of the former loyalty that one might say. He might still be commanding, because being a soldier himself or a former a soldier, the soldiers or in the military, they might not necessarily just be seeing a new president coming to power. They see a former, one of their own, you see. And so, for me, it's about the military, reinventing itself in Africa. You took over power previously as a dictator through a military coup, and then you left the power. Now you are coming back through the ballot box.
Yeah.
This has happened in other parts of the continent. We know the situation of Ghana, and all the other heads of states who have come back via the ballot box. And for me, that is a source of worry to say to what extent is the military still going to have like a background influence on things.
Would business be worried?
Well, right now, I don't see business worried. It's quite interesting because people are not investing. There's a freeze on investment, but everyone just seems to just be in waiting mode. It's not like in other countries where, suddenly there's an election like that and people start plugging out, moving people out of the country, etc. And the thing is, I think business is not that worried because business in Nigeria is largely held by Nigerians. I think it's probably the only economy that we have on this continent that is entirely, or for the most, owned by indigenous people. They have nowhere to go. That's where they make their money. The Naira was devalued about 30%, but people are still standing strong. So people do believe that, well, this is just something that will pass, and that eventually, once this is over, stability will come back. And I think that from what we see in Africa today, there's no situation, there haven't been any situations where chaos has endured after elections. Even Cote d'Ivoire, where I come from, eventually things stabilize and today's business as usual. So people understand that now.
But perhaps, lastly, America, they've said we're watching quite interestingly. Should we read anything out of that?
I don't think so, personally. I think America has lost the leverage that it used to have on African countries. By and large, we do what we want to do, right? Our leaders do what they want to do in the end. The leverage that the U.S. exercises on the continent today, at least politically, has diminished significantly, especially in some of these larger countries.
Okay. Yeah. Prof, a last one for you. Who's your money on?
That's a very difficult one. I'm busy looking at the figures coming in. As we came into the studio, Buhari was leading, but it was almost like neck and neck. It looks like he might win if the playing fields are level and if the current trend persists. But with an election, we always say there's an element of uncertainty in an election. The opposite could happen.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll wrap up the program. It's question time.
The shortage of nurses places those nurses who are working under such pressure.
To have one registered nurse looking after a ward full of patients, of over 40 patients, is unreasonable.
But Africa has made tremendous progress. In the year 2012, there were only 50,000 children, 50,000 children too many, but only 50,000 children that died of measles in the whole of Africa, compared to 330,000 in the year 2000.
For all your health issues, join Dr. Sello every Saturday, 9 to 10 a.m. CAT.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. We are now joined by Dr. Churimo Hengari. He's a senior researcher at the South Africa Institute of International Affairs. Dr. Hengari, welcome to the show. Quickly, there's a feeling that the military is making a comeback legally this time. Mm-hmm. Could that be the case?
Well, General Buhari is a retired general, so he's now going to assume the presidency. That's if he wins.
Yeah.
He's going to be a civilian president. So I think we are no longer dealing with a military regime in the older sense of the word.
Yeah.
But I think there's a bit of there's a good sense of optimism currently in Nigeria about what these elections might bring about. As you know, since 1960, Nigeria never had a transition from one government to another in a manner that is civilian. So this is an opportunity for Nigeria to effect that type of change. And if Jonathan remains president, that's also a welcome development, because it means that since 1999, Nigeria has been ruled on the basis of democratic ethos.
Okay. But, you know, it's interesting that he dropped the title general throughout. You know, it is only those of us in the media always, you know, go back to that he was a military ruler between 83 and 85 and all that. But it would, as you're saying, I suppose, then indicate that there's a need to also say to the world, we are moving away from the military. You know, we want a civilian type of administration here at home.
Yeah, I think Nigeria is now in that stage. The military, even during the elections, they took on a very low-key type of profile. The police was present around the polling stations to ensure that things run smoothly. So the presence of the military now is sort of the military is at the place where it ought to be. So I think it's a very good development for Nigeria. And about Buhari himself also moving away from the shadow of the military. I think it's important to recall that he came to power in 1983 through a military coup, and he was also removed by way of a military coup. So I think one can clearly see that the era of strongmen in Nigeria has evolved, and I think a very interesting democratic process is taking shape in the country.
Let's look at the regional politics. How are these elections going to affect the relationship, which somehow, not necessarily strained, but I mean, countries like Cameroon, for instance, are not so happy with how things have been, going on in as far as the fight against Boko Haram is concerned.
Well, it is true that the authorities in Abuja, especially the Jonathan Goodluck Jonathan government, has taken initially took on a very low-key approach towards the challenge of Boko Haram in the northeastern part of the country, with profound impact on Niger, Cameroon, as well as Chad. And Nigeria was criticized for that because Goodluck Jonathan took a very domestic political approach towards the challenges of Boko Haram. He assumed that it was more of a domestic political invention. He never really bothered too much about the regional dimension and the interest of Boko Haram to establish sort of an Islamic caliphate in that part of the world. But ever since, I think, since the elections were postponed, I think Jonathan Goodluck really knew that he really assumed quite strongly that Boko Haram was a key electoral issue and he had to do something about it. And clearly for Nigeria to be part of the regional sort of multinational force is a clear indication of Nigeria's own willingness to deal with the challenges of Boko Haram head on.
And what should be the priorities for the incoming president?
Well, Boko Haram still remains a threat. As you may recall, even during these elections, 11 civilians were killed in the state of Gombe. It still remains a key security challenge for Nigeria. It's mutating now in a different type of guerrilla strategy. So the northeastern part of the country remains, securitizing the northeastern part of the country remains a key challenge for the incoming administration. Number two, you also have issues of economic security that ought to be guaranteed by the incoming administration. With the falling oil prices globally, half of Nigeria's budget is possibly affected by that. So I think it remains to be seen how the incoming administration will deal with with that specific challenge. And also the third aspect that I think is quite important is the issue of youth unemployment. It is important to know that in Nigeria, roughly 10 million children of school-going age are not in school. So that's a key challenge. It's also a huge demographic challenge in terms of ensuring continuity when it comes to employment creation.
And the other reality is that Nigeria is not a poor country.
Well, it is true. Nigeria is not a poor country when you look at it in terms of its resources.
Yeah.
It's Africa's largest oil producer. But by way of GDP per capita income, it's still a poor country. Maybe not in the low least developed country category, but it's still a developing country with enormous challenges. Some of them that have highlighted issues of chronic insecurity. The issue of demobilization still remains a crucial challenge, especially in the southern end of the country, where in the Niger Delta specifically, where around 30,000 potential militias, which can arm any time. I think it's a huge challenge for the country. And also you also have chronic infrastructure deficits that must be dealt with by the new administration.
Let's look at their role, perhaps, as we close. On the continent, being referred to as the biggest economy on the continent, I suppose, does not just come, cheap. It's also got its own responsibilities.
Well, certainly, since last year, since last April, Nigeria is indeed the largest economy in the continent. I think the declining oil revenue might change the dynamic. We might see South Africa becoming the largest economy again. But Nigeria has always been traditionally, Nigeria is an anchor state. So it's crucial to Africa's development. It's crucial to regional stability. It's a role that the country has played quite well in the 1990s by ensuring peace in the states of the Mano River region, Liberia and Sierra Leone. It's important to know that Nigeria, through ECOMOG, played a very, very important role in terms of stabilizing that part of the continent. But due to its own internal political challenges, the country has not been able to play the role of an anchor state meaningfully, especially the Yaradua and Goodluck Jonathan administrations have not been really good at pushing for a much more stronger continental role. We saw that with Nigeria effectively losing out to South Africa when it comes to the chairperson of the African Union Commission. And we also saw that when it comes to
Fortunately, we've run out of time. Dr. Angaru, thank you very much for the time. That was question time for today. A big thank you to watching the show and to my guests as well. Welcome your feedback by email, questiontime@sabc.co.za. Our Twitter handle @questiontime24. From me and the crew, have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.